when North Carolina Central travels to Indianapolis, it's time that we rename this game the Walker Harris Classic. Oh, yeah, it's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me, making Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $20 off your first purchase. We'll wrap up today's episode with a look at our HBCU rankings that we do every Wednesday. That'll be in segment 3. In segment 1 and 2, we'll be looking at the Walker Harris Classic, a.k.a. North Carolina Central versus Norfolk State. I want to look at the performance of both quarterbacks and then also expand them because I think it's representative of a couple of things. So let's now start off with why I call this the Walker Harris Classic. It's North Carolina Central. Whenever they travel to Indianapolis and Walker Harris is the starting quarterback, he just knows how to get it done, right? And it's not just about winning. It's about how he performs in relation to everything else that we've seen. I would have an argument. Well, first off, last year was his first and only start. And I know it's against Valley, but I think those things kind of cancel out because we want to have an argument. Well, Valley's not this, Valley's not that. Well, it's his first start. So I think that those things cancel out and we can just look at the numbers for what they are. And then this year, they have a pretty good cornerback tandem out there at Norfolk State, right? So I'm not just going to poo-poo on them. I think that this was a really good performance in both seasons. And you look at what he's done in his career. Walker Harris has 15 touchdowns. His entire career, he has 15 touchdowns, both through the air and on the ground. 14 through the air, 1 on the ground. 9 of those touchdowns have come in the Circle City Classic. 5 last year, 4 this year. And he sat out pretty much the entire fourth quarter. So he probably could have did 5 and 5 back-to-back. This is his game. I'm not just calling it the Walker Harris Classic because he's 2-0 in it. I think that he's performed extremely well. You can have an argument between this week and last week on which one is the better Walker Harris performance. But that's where we expanded. Because I would say after the A&T game, I think that's when it was. It was either right before or right after. I had a question of, which I probably should remember the timeline, could have changed the question a little bit. But I believe it was afterwards. I said, hey, are they rolling now? Like, is this the offense that's now going to get to rolling? And I think the answer is yes, because you've seen Walker Harris play well 2 times now. So you're now looking at 2 games in a row in which he's been very impressive. I want to get some of the numbers from that game for the other players. But overall, in general, Walker Harris has looked like the quarterback that they had confidence in. And that's a Circle City Classic thing. Because in his first game starting against Mississippi Valley State, that was my takeaway. I walked away and said, oh, I get everything that Coach Oliver has to say about this guy. I see the vision, right? Now I walk away from this one, not necessarily seeing the vision because that's been seen already. But now where I'm at with it is this offense, he feels like he has full command of the offense. There was a time, I can't remember what quarter it was, but there was a throw where he saw some very late pressure. He got hit as he thrown, but it didn't seem to affect him at all. So you would have thought that there was no pressure. That's not always the case for quarterbacks, right? It's not as if I'm unaffected until I get hit. There's times when the player's 2-3 steps away. You may be able to get your full throwing motion off, but the fear will keep you from stepping into a pass. The fear will make you loft it. You may even step back as you throw. You're not as confident. You didn't see that on that play. And then his last touchdown was one of beauty, where he moved in the pocket a little bit, squared himself up, and threw a pass going back towards the right side of the field. Obviously, he's left-handed. So and so that was across his body. I just was very impressed. I was very impressed with who I see Walker Harris to be. Make sure I don't miss anything about his numbers. Well, let's give him out. 17 to 22, 263 yards. Excuse me. That was last year. 17 to 28, 263 yards and 5 touchdowns. This year, he was 19 to 25 and 244 yards and 4 touchdowns. Excuse me. Overall, he just looked smooth. I thought he had really good ball placement on multiple levels of the field. I thought that he showed a good usage of his legs at times. He didn't do too much of it. He's not going to run a lot, like that's not his bag. But I would say that he showed the ability to do it when he needed to. And the question I had over everything else is North Carolina Central's offense rolling? And if I had to base it off of the last 2 weeks, the answer is yes. We'll see them against Campbell this week. And if their offense looks good against Campbell, we're going to have a real conversation about, are they going to run away with the MEAC? Right now, they easily look like the best team in the conference. I don't even think that's a conversation. But are they going to run away with it? Are they going to be able? Is anybody even going to be close? Not record-wise, because that North Carolina Central can't take care of all that. But I'm talking about when it comes to those games, are they going to have close games? Are they going to win most of these games by double digits? Are they going to beat a team like Howard by double digits? That's what I'm looking for. And Walker Harris, he's looked good the last 2 weeks. But now you see Jamari Taylor, who he's always been a dog. Now you look at a guy like Arthur Rodgers. Rodgers had 8 carries in his game for 64 yards, excuse me. So there's 8 a pop. And Jamari Taylor is one of the best running backs. His ability to shake the first defender is always going to be impressive. Jamari Taylor's ability to take on contact and seem in his forward progress not be impeded. This is going to be very talented. I thought that Walker looks like he's developing more chemistry with his wide receivers. His running back is already really good. His offensive line is going to keep him protected. This is a complete team. We didn't even get to the defensive side of the ball, and we'll do that in segment 2 because the way that Norfolk State used Jalen Daniels was very interesting, but it points something out about North Carolina Central's defense. And that's something I really want to break down. So we've touched on the offense for a little bit. We touched on why I think that this is the Walker Harris Classic. But let's move on to the other side of the ball defensively, because I want to break some things down. And this is where I really feel like I'm going to have some fun. So let's try to enjoy ourselves as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime, and Gametime is the official ticket sponsor of the Locked On Podcast Network. It doesn't matter if you're a last-minute person, if you're a planning ahead person. Both of those work, right? Because we always talk about, well, you can have it up to an hour after kickoff, tip-off, the start of the event, whatever, right? You can do that. Okay, but what if you plan 3-4 weeks in advance, 2 months in advance? That works too. It's not only for last minute. Gametime has the best deals no matter what. They have flash deals, zone deals, where you just basically pick a section and then they make it work from there because you're not really picky about where exactly you sit, but you have a general region. They'll make sure that you get the best available seats. And my favorite part about it, my 2 favorite parts, and I'll tell you this. My first favorite part is that I can toggle on where they give me all of the fees before I check out. I hate hidden fees. Don't give me an additional $20 after I said I want to buy it. And then also you get to see your seat before you purchase. See the view from your seat before you purchase. So all you have to do is download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $20 off your first purchase. Go to Gametime. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you check out Locked On Saints. My guy Ross Jackson is still doing phenomenal work, and you're not going to want to miss it if you want to be a smarter NFL fan, even if you're not a Saints fan. If you're a Saints fan, what are you doing? Why are you not already there? But let's talk about Jalen Daniels. Norfolk State is interesting to me. I remember when I talked about Otto Koons returning from suspension. And I said, hey, I think that Otto Koons is going to be the starting quarterback upon return because of how Jalen Daniels is being used. And it's funny that I had that slip because that's kind of the point that I was going to transition to. I accidentally just called Jaden Daniels, because that's who Norfolk State was trying to make him against North Carolina Central. It was a really unique game plan where they leaned on his legs specifically in that second quarter. Specifically in that second quarter, it felt like everything was dominated by Jalen Daniels' legs and how he was going to use them, the threat of them, the decoy of them. It was insane, right? And we'll get to that in a second. But the point of what I was trying to say, is that when Otto Koons was returning from injury or from suspension, I thought he was going to be the starting quarterback because they didn't show any real trust in Jalen Daniels the whole time. That obviously was not the case. In this game was the one where they seemed to show the most trust, and this was in a MEAC opener. So I thought that was really interesting. That was a huge statement from Dawson Odoms. And it wasn't as if it took time to get there, because I've had the complaint. I think it was specifically that Hampton game where you're losing. You're still not putting anything on his arm. You're losing. You're still not throwing the football. Well, in this game, they changed that up completely. Instead of leaning away from the throwing, they leaned into it. And I mean early. To start off the game off rip, you come out and you're throwing the rock. Matter of fact, let me see. I'm gonna go through the first couple of plays, because I think the first drive, it was 2 throws and a run. Throw, run, throw. 3 and out. Then you go to the next drive. Throw, run, throw. Like, that's how it was going. This is the first 2 drives that you're looking at the same exact thing. It's funny because it was actually 1st and 10 incomplete, 2nd and 10, you get 2 yards, go to 3rd and 8 incomplete. Ironically, let's see. That's the whole first quarter. Oh, no, it's not. Excuse me. Then you get to the next drive. Throw, run, throw. This is 3 drives in a row where you're throwing on first down. Then you're running and you're not getting anything. The next drive. And this one is when things, I think, started to change. So you have a run by Jalen Daniels. Then you have another run by a running back. Then you have a pass that gets completed. Another pass, a Jalen Daniels run, another pass. You're looking at, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 plays. That was 8 plays. And you had a running back run the ball twice. 2 times. I just thought that was so interesting. And this is all in the first quarter. That's the first, 4 drives that I just broke down? That's the first 4 drives of the first quarter. And then in the second quarter, they got even more dependent on Jalen Daniels. Remember what I said earlier? Against Norfolk State, against North Carolina Central, it felt as if Norfolk State was trying to turn Jalen Daniels into Jaden Daniels by leaning on his legs throughout the entirety of the second quarter. We just looked at how dependent they were on his arm in the first quarter. That's surprising, because against FAMU, he had 9 throws. Against Hampton, he had 12 throws. Those are the only FCS games. In this game, he had 25 pass attempts. So that's already a drastic difference. But then stylistically, it felt like Norfolk State saw Alabama State run the ball with Andrew Body and said, let's replicate that. Because in the second quarter, I swear to you, I think that the total amount of snaps that a running back saw in that quarter, 1 hand, 2 hands at best. And I'm talking about both Evans and King. This was the Jalen Daniels show where they put him in shotgun. It was him. They had 2 tight ends right near the line of scrimmage, and they kept running quarterback power, a quarterback counter, and then they just used that as a threat for the entirety of their offensive scheme. He was either running it. He was either play action where he faked like he was going to run his step back and try to take a shot. Those deep shots did not work. Or he would try to step up, do a quick little RPO type of action, but everything was predicated on the threats of Jalen Daniels' legs. And I thought he did a decent job, emphasis on decent. But it just makes me wonder, why did they do that? That's a whole quarter in which you adapted your attack to attack this way, all based off of 1 play, and threw away your running backs. I wasn't a fan of that, but you threw away your running backs and instead leaned on the legs of your quarterback. To me, that tells me that they saw something that they felt like they could exploit. I don't know. I don't think they exploited the way they wanted to, because it didn't lead to points. It was some decent yardage, but whatever. Do other people feel that way? And that's one of the things that I really look at. When it comes to North Carolina Central, I think that they have shown themselves to be the best team in the MEAC, arguably the best team in Black college football this year, right? But the one time that they looked vulnerable to an FCS opponent, or to an HBCU opponent, I should say, was quarterback runs. They looked vulnerable against Elon in the first half with the running back too. But you didn't choose to lean into the running game with your running backs of King and Evans. You didn't do that. You chose to go the Alabama State route and go the Andrew Body route. and try to run with your quarterback. How many other teams in the MEAC, as we get closer to conference play, who have an athletic quarterback are going to lean into that aspect of it? I have to wonder if it'll be a lot. I would have to wonder that. Norfolk State didn't pull that out of nowhere. I can actually point directly to where they pulled it from. They pulled it from week 1. They pulled it from the Orange Blossom Classic. This is a copycat sport. Monkey see, monkey do. So who's going to be the next one that steps out and says, oh, we like our athleticism. Let's try to run our quarterback a lot. Jalen Daniels had 13 carries in this game. 13 carries. That he had a 14th carry if you look at the box score, but that's just the sack. King and Evans together had 13 carries. And listen, I don't think that they were overly effective. The box score will once again lie to you. Evans had a 33-yard run. He ended up with 38 on the day on 7 carries or 6 carries, something like that. No, that was Evans. Evans did that. Then King, he had 41 yards on the day, but he had a 17-yard run, and a 10-yard run in the fourth quarter. The drive after that happened, it led to points, but the drive after that happened, North Carolina Central had their backup quarterback in. The game was over. Like, if we're talking about impactful moments, it wasn't a lot of rushes. Admittedly, it was not a lot of rushes, but in a very small, too small sample size. I think that was poor coaching. I would not have liked that. Even when the run game doesn't work, if that's your bread and butter, you have to keep going to the table with it. But in that small sample size, I thought North Carolina Central, they showed a really good run defense for yet another game. And if we're talking about stopping the running backs, I thought they stopped the running backs against Alabama State. I thought they did much better in the second half. They showed improvement against Elon. I would say that they lost that battle in general, but they showed the improvement. And I talked about the physicality, which is a big part of run defense. You have to be physical. It's a mentality that goes with it. Those linebackers are flying around the field. I really like Urine because when you're looking at him, he's a player you see him shift through space while watching, right? I don't think I'm the closest onlooker of football at all times, but I find it very difficult to miss how he shifts through mess. He doesn't take on too many blocks and get engaged and not be able to discard. A lot of times he's patient, he sees, and he moves around, he gets through traffic as opposed to blowing through traffic. That's what I've seen. And like I said, I'm not the closest onlooker, so there's times when I'm missing it, but it's a really talented linebacker. I want to see. I'm telling you, I cannot wait to see Howard versus North Carolina Central just because of this battle. The battle of those running backs, which I've seen North Carolina Central do pretty well with. Of course, the E-line back got them, but like I said, I think they improved in the second half, specifically that mid-third quarter to fourth quarter. And you're going to have some athleticism at the quarterback position. It's going to be a lot of people who can attack you. I can't wait to watch that game. I can't. I'm really thinking about going. And I don't know if I will, but I'm closely thinking about going to that game. But anyway, Jalen Daniels, that was unique. I would say that you may look at his 25 yards or his 25 passing attempts and only have 12 completions, less than 100 yards. You may say, well, that's why they don't lean on him. I thought that his wide receivers did a really bad job of helping him out. There were some deep shots that he missed. There were some open guys streaking down the field that he was a couple of, yards a little too long on. I think that happened 3 times. I thought that for the most part, though, he had a lot of good ball placements. I just thought I was impressed. I thought that he looked better, especially in that first half. He was like 3 for 11, but he should have had 4 more catches. They were not helping him at all. They weren't, man. And that's why the box score does not tell the whole story. And I wonder on one of the games that I didn't see where I'm talking about him like this, did that happen then too? Because I liked the things that I saw from him against FAMU. I liked some of the things I saw from him against North Carolina Central. Couple games I've seen some things to work with. My whole thing about him was they're not giving him the workload. They're not showing him the trust. This game they did, and it was the opening of MEAC play. I would like to see them do that again, maybe lessen his rushing. If you can give me 20 some odd passes, but then you split up the rushing total, like between him and the 2 running backs, they had 26. There's no reason he should have half of those by himself. Should let them get 20 by themselves, 20 to 22. combine Evans and King, and then give Daniels a couple of more. That's how I feel about it. But I like what I see from the kid. Anyway, let's push forward and move away from this and move towards the rankings, because Grambling didn't move despite losing to PV. They're still in the top 3, directly at 3, and that was an interesting choice and one that I'm not too mad about. So let's look at that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and FanDuel is the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. Now, with FanDuel, you can put down a $5 bet, your first $5 bet, and you'll get $200 back in bonus bets no matter what. So for this, I'm looking at FanDuel week 4. You have Thursday Night Football coming on this week, the Falcons versus the Buccaneers, right? So as a Saints fan, I'll be watching that very closely. Then you have a really good game between the Steelers and the Cowboys on Sunday night. These are just primetime games that I'm very excited to see. So I would suggest that you go take a part of that. The WNBA playoffs are here. The MLB playoffs are here. The NHL is here. NBA is taking. Devontae Adams just asked for a trade. I'm sure you can put some money down on where his next destination will be. All you have to do is go to FanDuel.com. That's all you have to do. Go to FanDuel.com, put down a $5 bet, get $200 back in bonus bets, and you'll make every moment more. As wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. I want to look at some of these HBCU rankings. Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. Going into week 6, we do our rankings every week. Sometimes they're more exciting than others. And right now it's not the most exciting, which is why they're at segment 3. That fell secondary to the Norfolk State versus North Carolina Central game in the Walker Heritage Classic. It just did. But there wasn't too much movement. The top 5 is pretty much the top 5, except Hampton fell out. And I guess the top 5 isn't really the top 5. That's 3 people in there that changed. But at 1, the top 3 is the top 3. That's for sure. At 1, you still have FAMU. They didn't play this week because of a postponement due to the hurricane. I hope everybody in Florida and North Carolina is doing all right. Number 2 is still North Carolina Central. And then you have number 3, Grambling. That was the top 3 last week, and Grambling lost. And this is what Brother Becton said. He said Grambling State stays at number 3, but that gap between the top 2 and number 3 has widened after Grambling's 5 overtime loss to PV. So there you have it. It's not that they're lower in the pecking order, but they're not as close to the elites. So I think that when you're looking at it, you're looking at FAMU, North Carolina Central as the clear top 2. I don't know if I necessarily agree. I still have Jackson State in the mix. I know that Jackson State lost to Grambling, which is why I think they felt the need to put Grambling at 3, because Jackson State is 4 and Tennessee State is 5. I'm not mad at that. Not mad at that at all. They gave Jackson State the nod over Tennessee State because they beat the real TSU. So I guess when you beat the real TSU, you get to jump the fake TSU. Logically, that makes sense to me. But yeah, then you have Tennessee State who bounced back, and they had themselves a pretty good performance too, winning the Big South OVC game at the last minute. So got to get kudos to them, and I'm really rooting for Tennessee State. You know, I throw my jokes out there and I call them the fake TSU and all of the other good stuff, but I like what Eddie George is attempting to do. I like the way that he approaches the game and approaches scheduling specifically. And I like how he approaches the HBCU culture. And I remember and we've all praised him. Like, as a community in the HBCU world, we've praised Eddie George for how he approached. And, you know, he caught a little bit of flack for what he said about viewing habits last year and fan attendance last year. But I like that. I like that he said it, man. I do. That's how he feels about it. He expressed it, and I like that. I like the way that he's going about things. You know, he doesn't have to. I don't think liking how somebody goes about it means agreeing with everything they say. Granted, I did agree with that, but it's not about agreeing everything. It's about looking. There's mad people who do things that I agree with, but I don't like how they do it. I like how he's doing it. So I'm rooting for them in the Big South OVC because it's been a long time since we've had an HBCU champion. I want to see them at least contend. And I think Jalen Ellis is a pretty good quarterback, to be honest. Then you have Hampton at 6, which I think is appropriate. I didn't think that they should have been above Tennessee State. And Definitely not Jackson State, in my opinion. But then you have South Carolina State. That's interesting. They have them as the number 2 HBCU, or excuse me, number 2 MEAC team. So that was fascinating. Morgan State drops to 8, which they should. Southern raises to 9 from 10 because TSU dropped. And Alabama State is in the top 10 again. I can't wait to watch this Alabama State versus FAMU game. That's going to be one that's very interesting. I think a lot of people have given up on that game. And while I understand why, I'm not a part of the bunch. I think that this is going to be a very good game. I really do. I think that Alabama State's defense is going to be geared up, and I think they're going to be looking to raise, or better yet, so we don't use any level of profanity. They're going to be looking to wreak havoc. And I think that they will be able to at times. It's going to be an interesting one. I'm leaning towards that being our game of the week, so I'm not going to say too much about it right now. I'm leaning towards that, but I'm gonna keep it quiet right now. It's between that and in North Carolina Central versus Campbell. But last time I did that, North Carolina Central got beat pretty badly. So I don't know if I'm going to do that again. But anyway, we'll have to see. Tomorrow's Thursday, so you'll be able to see exactly who's going to be our game of the week based off of who is not selected. So let's get into that on tomorrow's episode. In the meantime, in between time, until the next time we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed, peace.